Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Before I start today's show, I have exciting news for founders, CEOs, and franchise brand presidents. Join me January 14th through the 16th, 2025 in Tampa for the first ever Emerging Franchise Brands live event, an exclusive opportunity designed just for you. It's my blueprint for success at every stage of franchising, one I wish I'd had, packed with real-world solutions and strategies to solve your challenges today and prepare for those you'll face tomorrow. Space is limited, so head over to emergingfranchisebrands.com to secure your spot today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the CEO of Brooklyn Water Bagels, Dan Smith. Dan, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Frank. Thanks.
Dan, thanks so much for being on the show.
Exciting to be here.
We got to talk bagels, man. New York bagels? Are you kidding me?
Absolutely.
So, if you would share with the audience the origin of the company.
Yeah, if you have ever visited New York or you've lived in New York and you have a New York bagel, you know that it's absolutely fantastic. But one of the key components of that bagel, besides all the wonderful ingredients, is the effect that New York water has on the bagel. So the idea of the company is we wanted to be able to take New York bagels out to other parts of the country. But how do you do that without having that water supply? So originally we looked at shipping water over state lines in tankers. Well, guess what, Frank? That's very expensive. And actually you can't take water over a state line. So we actually worked with some experts and created a water system. And we actually put a water system in our restaurants that filters the water and purifies it to bottled water quality.
Okay.
And then, it's our secret sauce, we then inject minerals back into it that replicate New York water, and we use that to make our dough. We also use it to kettle our bagels with. So a real New York bagel is kettled. We put malt and water in there, and we kettle the bagels so that it puts a nice crunchy outside on it, and it puts a nice shine on the bagel, and it still protects that chew. You want that chew in a great New York bagel.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's right.
My New York accent is going to come out like big time during this episode.
I like it. Maybe mine comes out too.
Very, very cool. So obviously what makes Brooklyn Water Bagel unique is, of course, the water purification process. I'd love to hear how you got involved. I understand you've been with the company now for 4 years as a CEO?
Yeah, I've been with the company for 4 years. Prior to that, I was consulting, and they asked me to get involved to take a look at the business. And I was engaged with the company for a couple of years and really enjoyed that. And was working with the board. And then around the time of the pandemic, perfect time.
Of course.
They reached out and asked me to get involved as CEO of the company, and I got involved at that point.
What a hell of a time to start franchising, right?
Absolutely. It was wonderful being inside those restaurants in the middle of the pandemic, but it actually was a great experience. Taught me a lot.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a great testament to having to prove your leadership skills and communication with the franchise owners and making sure that everybody's rallying together and getting behind it, because we all know that whether it's a pandemic or a recession, there's always going to be some sort of crisis looming in the future, and it makes us stronger, the survival of the fittest, so to speak, in franchising.
No question, and I think that was probably one of the reasons I fell in love with Brooklyn Water Bagel, because I was so impressed when I came in the pandemic, and it was so challenging. We had so many team members, in the early days when people were concerned about what does this disease do? Am I going to get sick? Am I going to get real sick and end up in the hospital or worse? That loved the concept, loved the guests, loved the brand so much that they came in and wanted to be a part of it and worked hard. And some of those folks could have stayed at home and participated in government-funded programs and so forth. Instead, they came in and gave their all to the business. And it was just an amazing thing to watch. It was an amazing thing to be a part of. Wow. And I love that. And that's the culture of Brooklyn Water Bagel. And that's what I think has positioned us for the growth that we're about to go through right now.
Sweet. Well, talking about the numbers here for a moment, I understand you have 4 company-owned locations plus 11 franchises that are open, but we got quite a bit in development. Even though everything right now is in Florida, you got 20 in development plus another 6 that are probably going to be open around the time that this podcast airs.
Right. We're opening up in the next 60 to 90 days. We're excited about it.
That is fantastic. Why Florida? How did Florida become the first state?
I think Florida was there because originally, there was a lot of New York retirees that were down here, and we thought that would be interesting because they already knew and understood the bagel. I think over time that's changed. People have traveled so much and they've had those experiences and they know the bagel more, and that's why we're preparing to expand out to some other parts of the country like the Midwest and the Southwest and Southeast right now.
Okay. One of the questions I get so often from fellow franchisors, founders or CEOs that are trying to expand their business early on is where to find franchisees. And, there's 4,000 franchise brands that are out there. So it's a really crowded space. Where have you guys found your franchisees? What's been the source?
Obviously through some of the marketing that we're doing through, having conversations like we are today, Frank. Also networking out there and going to events and talking to some existing franchisees of other brands where we think our brand complements them.
Okay.
So for example, obviously we're a breakfast concept. We're open from a breakfast and lunch concept. We're open from 6 a.m. until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's say you're a franchisee for a pizza company that doesn't have an exclusive and you are selling pizzas at night. You might find us an interesting choice out there because we balance out what you're doing at being, more of a morning and afternoon concept. So we've had conversations with people like that have had success in those areas and gotten them excited about what we do at Brooklyn.
That's great. And I would imagine there are people that once they taste the bagel that they want to open a location.
Definitely.
All the time.
Absolutely. So guests that come in and people that come in and try it has also been another big avenue where we've gotten folks interested in franchising with us.
So for those that are interested in opening a Brooklyn Water Bagel, one of the things I think we should point out is that you're only looking for multi-unit franchise operators, correct?
Correct. And we're looking for operators that have operating experience. They're well capitalized and they have operating experience out there. And sometimes you have folks that come in and say, boy, wouldn't it be a lot of fun to be involved? And I appreciate that. But I really think to be successful in a franchise, and it's a two-way street,
sure,
you want to make sure that somebody knows what they're getting themselves into, has had some of that restaurant experience in their past so that they can be successful.
I love that. What I love is that you have the courage to decide this is only going to be a multi-unit franchise opportunity. You're going to stick to your guns with as a strategy, because a lot of founders or CEOs, they're at a standpoint where they just want to expand. They just want to sell a franchise, right? And they want to start getting numbers, but you know exactly who you want. And certainly if you're going to go into the multi-unit arena, you're going to get a much more sophisticated franchise owner than somebody that just wants to open one single unit for the most part.
Yeah, I don't know if they're more sophisticated but certainly by doing it, it also allows us to work with a smaller number of franchisees and be able to give them quality support and be able to have quality marketing relationships and quality development relationships and so forth. In my past, I have spent time with organizations that, really like the single unit franchisee, and that's great for them and wonderful, but we just didn't think that was the match for us.
That's fair enough. What about ensuring consistency? Because this is such a unique taste, and we want to make sure that somebody can go to a Brooklyn Water Bagel in Delray and get the same experience in Wesley Chapel. How do we, aside from the water, how do we make sure that the entire operation is consistent from location to location?
I mean, that is a challenge, I think, for all of us in the industry, right?
Sure.
So most of it starts with training and really, making sure that people understand what we stand for. But it's constant and consistent follow-up and checking it out and making sure that people are staying on top of the experience that we expect out there.
Okay. What does training and support look like for you guys?
We have training stores like other concepts do. We typically, if we bring in a manager, we train them for 2 months before they are introduced to a unit.
2 months?
Yes, to make sure they really understand everything that's going on in the restaurant, what our expectations are from a guest service perspective, what our standards are for our product and our execution, and then also understanding the business aspects of it. I think that's important too. If you come to work for Brooklyn Water Bagel, we want to help you be a great restaurateur, but we also want to help make you a great business person. And if you decide to do something else in your future, which hopefully not, hopefully you stay with us, but if you decide to do something else, we want you walking away and say, you know what? I really learned how to run a business and understand a business when I was with Brooklyn Water Bagel.
Sure. Is there a challenge that your franchisees face that's unique to other brands, and how do you help get them through it through training and support?
I don't think so. I think we have some unique benefits. And one of the unique benefits that we get, and when you mention uniqueness, this is why it jumped into my mind. Because our restaurants are open from 6 in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're one of the very few restaurant concepts that I could think of that you could say to a manager, hey, you can be home for dinner with your family every night of the week. And you can. You can drop your kids off at school and you can get to see them, play the soccer game or the dance recital or whatever it may be, and then be home with your family. So we have a nice work-life balance that's built into our business that's really rewarding. And it's a great, as CEO, it's great for me and even for franchisees to be able to say, hey, I can manage the business at that point and I can have more of a well-rounded life. That's great. I can be involved in my community. I can do other things besides just work all the time. Is great.
What would you say is the profile of the ideal franchise owner?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. The ideal franchise owner is somebody that understands restaurant operations and the necessity for giving a great experience, a consistent experience all the time, and somebody that buys into culture. Culture is a word I think that we bat around a lot in our industry, but culture is building, an attitude in the restaurant that's respectful towards team members, getting them to work cooperatively, really focusing on that guest experience, plugging in the community, and having a little fun while you're doing all of it. I think if that's there, then you've got the right culture for success. We talk a lot about happy service. We want to give happy service, which is maybe a simplistic way of talking about a big smiley face, and we want to be happy when we give service. But in order for service to be happy, it's got to be expeditious. It's got to be, it's got to be friendly. It's got to be polite. It's got to be all of those things. So, that's our culture. We want to have happy service and happy franchisees.
Yeah. I don't know. My personal opinion is you can't teach culture, right? Culture is definition of culture to me is how we treat one another.
Right.
So the brand is only going to be as good as how we treat one another.
Right.
What about the traits that a franchisee needs in order to be successful?
I think they have to be, obviously have to have a little bit of entrepreneurial bent about them, right? Okay. So it's not a pure entrepreneurial experience, right? If it was pure, then they would be creating their own bagel restaurant. They are a franchisee. But you have to have a little bit of that excitement to be, your own business person and so forth. I think you have to be committed to the brand. You have to be committed to the principles of the brand, to our standards, processes, and so forth, and then to really being a part of your community. You have to be willing to get out there and really engage in the community and let people know who you are and what you are and what Brooklyn Water Bagel is all about.
Well, that's one product that if you get out in the community and you do it right, I mean, you're going to have some local fame.
There's no question. And it should be a fun part of the community. I mean, like, what's more fun than, a great iced coffee and a tasty bagel breakfast sandwich? I mean, there's nothing better.
Absolutely. Okay. So what is the investment range for a franchise?
The investment range, again, is going to depend upon what part of the country you're in and so forth.
Sure.
But anywhere from maybe from about $500,000 on the low side to about $600,000-$700,000.
Okay. And your requirement is typically it's 5 units?
Yes. We want to see somebody come in for 5 to 7 units. Are there cases where we've talked to people about 3 units? Sure. There's also people that come in and talk to us about 10 units. But sort of the sweet spot is 5 to 7 units.
Okay. And Dan, do you have like a criteria location-wise that you want to adhere to if somebody wanted to have a development of 5 units? Like, how far apart they are, or can they spread across the state? I mean, how, or
we want those areas to be clustered.
Yeah.
But it really depends upon where they are. And we work with the franchisee to put together an area that we know will make them successful, but at the same time, services the community that they're in the right way.
How do you know if a territory is not going to be good? In other words, who doesn't want a bagel?
We actually have, predictive modeling and so forth that we've utilized that, takes a look at our existing customers, our existing successful units,
Great.
And it correlates it, and it's a predictive tool.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the group that we work with, I think is a solid group, and they're based right here in Tampa. Frank.
Sweet. Dan, to be to be a leader of an organization, there's always going to be challenges. There's mistakes that we've made along the way, and we hopefully have learned from them so we don't make the same mistake twice. Is there something you could share maybe with some other, emerging franchisors, or maybe a challenge or a mistake that you guys made early on that you've adapted and learned from that you'd be willing to share?
Actually, I haven't. I would say that one of the lessons we learned, I think, interestingly, when you look at different marketing programs right now with some restaurants, collaborations are a big deal.
With other
brands. And
yeah.
you think, hey, maybe I can work with one of these brands. It's good for both of us and
Sure.
so forth. I think we learned that can work and can be positive, but maybe not as great as you might expect.
Like your expectations of the results wasn't as big as maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we had some of those experiences. And I also think sometimes when your brand is strong enough as it is, then you really focus on that. You develop products, you work on products that are within your brand line. Sometimes going outside of that's not the best way to go.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about marketing and bringing on the right people. How do we ensure that you're bringing on people that are going to be really good at operating a business and not buying this because they like bagels?
Really tough, but yeah, I mean, that all goes on in the conversation and so forth.
Yeah.
And sitting down and talking to them about what their business plan is and where they see going in the future and what drives them, what things they've done that's brought them success, what things they've done that has brought them some failures in the past. So you understand that. And did you learn from your failures, and are you doing things differently?
Right.
I think understanding all of that. I don't think it's necessarily a perfect equation, though. I don't think there's a perfect answer. I think that there's different ways to be successful on our business, and you have to be open to that when you're talking to franchisees.
Yeah, you certainly want to know, where their head is at, what their expectations are. I always found the challenging part is that I expected when people first bought a franchise from me that they were like me, and that they were going to, I don't want to say just work as hard as I did, but maybe my expectations were that they had the same expectations of themselves that I had of myself.
Right.
And I learned really quickly that people have all different aspirations. And in my business, it was really a lifestyle kind of franchise. And it was sports, it was kids. So people did it because they loved it. And I had some people that were really high flyers, and they wanted to, rule the world in their territory and
right.
and have just, all the market share.
Right.
And they would look at some other franchise owners and say, hey, that guy or that girl, they're not that good. And I would have conversations with that franchise owner, and they were super happy. They were actually, it was meeting their needs and meeting their expectations. And like one of the big lessons I learned, I guess, is that not everybody's equal in terms of the aspirations of a business.
I think you're absolutely right. And you're also right when you say you're looking at how you do it, right?
Right.
And I have to check myself on that all the time. I get so fired up and impassioned and believe that there's always a way to figure something out and there's a way to get it done. And you realize that people are not always wired the way that you are.
Sure.
What I also absolutely believe 100% is if they come to you with an idea, even if you think it might not be perfect, but it's still interesting. It's on, target with the brand and so forth. But they really believe in it and they are committed to making it successful.
Right.
It will absolutely be successful.
That's awesome.
Because they're all in on it.
Sure. Has there been any influence from a franchise owner with an idea or suggestion they made that got implemented?
Absolutely. With new product concepts or different ways to do service or different systems for managing data, results, and so forth, all of the above. Yeah, I think having conversations with our franchisees and talking and getting thoughts and ideas is a great part of the business.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest surprises in franchising, is that the benefit of having franchise owners that had incredible, backstory, experience and all different careers and facets of life, that they brought something to the table that I wasn't expecting. That was innovative ideas on how they managed people or how they wanted to position the product or experiences. And some of our best ideas came from our franchise owners.
Right. You asked me about my biggest surprise. I would say my biggest surprise with the business was all the constant feedback we had early on people wanting to change and tweak and mess with the menu. I worked for Domino's Pizza for a period of time, and at one point, Domino's had 2-size pizzas, 10 toppings, and they only did classic Coke. At the time, even franchisees were saying, hey, can't we do a Diet Coke? And the response was no. It was very regimented. But at the time, the company opened up 1,000 units in 1 year, and it was very focused on the program and executing.
Sure.
Same thing if you go to Chick-fil-A, an
right.
amazing organization or amazing restaurant company doing unbelievable things, but they don't mess with the original chicken sandwich. It is what it is. And I was surprised at all of the feedback we would get to tweak it. And now that's sort of gone. But at some point, I do believe as a company, you have to say, this is who we are. This is our product. We're proud of it. We're going to really stand behind this, and we're going to really make sure that this is a part of what we do.
Right. That's a great lesson, by the way, for folks that are listening to this that are early in franchising, because it's very typical, as you guys experienced, as a new franchise brand, you are receptive, obviously, to ideas. It's always good to be receptive to how big you are, but your typical early adopter franchisee is somebody who's going to be a risk taker. Obviously, they came to you when you didn't have any locations or a few. So if they're more entrepreneurial and they're more of a risk taker, they are going to be coming forward with more ideas. They're going to expect to be listened to more than somebody who's your 100th franchisee. That person looks and sounds totally different than your first franchisee. In fact,
absolutely.
Yeah, I found that the 100th franchisee, the only reason why they came to your brand is because you had sold 99 franchises before them, and they want to make sure you had your systems and processes.
Absolutely. And it's a delicate balance, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure that they feel like they are part of the brand and that their input is heard and understood. Yeah. And we're committed to that. We want to make sure our franchisees are involved and build us into something great. Like I said before, so many of the wonderful ideas that we've executed have come from our franchise community. At the same point, you can't take everybody's idea all the time, because otherwise then it ends up, slowly but surely diluting the brand and diluting what you're trying to do with your products.
Sure. I'm really curious, since I most of my interviews are with founders, and I do talk to the CEOs from time to time, but I'd love to get your take on what it's like coming into a brand last 4 years. You're going to be on this incredible trajectory, and coming in as the CEO, so you don't have the history of how things were when they first started, and how you take your vision as the CEO, plus I guess you obviously have a board that a board that you answer to, and how you are able to navigate that.
It's a great question. I mean, it comes with some juggling, right? You've got, again, that goes back to a lot of the input and insights that you're getting from people. I would say coming into a company that is this great, that had so many good things going for it, was, an honor. Truthfully, it was exciting to be a part of it. And you step back and realize that there's already great people doing great things, and there's already been a tremendous amount of success. And you want to recognize that and not mess with that.
Yeah, it's like you have to find the balance between not breaking anything that wasn't working yet. The only way we grow is if we progress equals happiness, right? We got to keep growing and moving. So how do you juggle that as somebody that comes into the company?
I think you have to go in and, as I said, be thoughtful and really understand what's working there and be respectful of that, and then build the respect of those in the organization, so that when you provide insights and you provide some thoughts and you start talking about a vision of where you want to move forward, they see that, that the legacies and traditions of the past are built into the business going forward, and some of the new ideas aren't going to be so disruptive to cause problems. Okay. And I think when you do that and you sort of get some consensus and you start to move, and then you start to do some things that start to build some wins for you, then you build an organization that can ultimately be very successful.
Yeah, cool. So it's sort of like you're honoring the past, yet you're looking ahead to the future on how you build on
exactly
it.
Right.
And Yeah, it's not for everybody, for sure.
Right, and dealing with the changes that are going on in the world and in the economy and the marketplace out there, and with guests' needs and demands. So,
how do you think Brooklyn Water Bagel will stand up during a changing economy?
I think it's going to stand up just fine. If somebody else comes and goes, oh, I don't think there'll be any problems whatsoever, I think that that's naive. So I don't want to sit here and say that there's not certain impacts out there, but I would also say that we've dealt with a lot of them right now.
Yeah.
I mean, to go through the pandemic was certainly a challenge. Immediately thereafter, to go through the supply chain crisis and then the labor crunch and so forth, all things that the business had not dealt with in the past and that all restaurants have been dealing with,
sure,
was a lot, and a lot to learn very fast. It was real-time learning. And I think, now with inflation and so forth, brands are still learning, what's the balance between making sure you're taking care of your restaurant and your team and doing an appropriate balance with pricing and value from a guest perspective. And that's, we're all learning and talking about that right now too.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges, certainly not unique, to Brooklyn Water Bagel, but overall to really any concept, it's the labor shortage.
Right.
Is there anything you can offer to maybe other folks that are listening to this that have a brand on how you've been able to combat the labor shortage and, keep the stores open and functioning?
Again, I think one of the benefits is our hours of operation, right? We provide something that's really seen as a benefit by a lot of team members, but then it's also the culture. It's also the culture that you have when you come in. If it's a fun place to work and people feel like they're part of something and that they're really doing something meaningful in the community, that their job is a noble cause, then other people want to join that team. They want to participate and be a part of it.
Sure. Yeah, I've always heard the quote that people don't quit companies, they quit managers.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty true statement.
Yeah.
But if enough quit because managers, then the company overall has to take a close look at itself, right?
Exactly. True. Dan, what about the long-term vision for the company? What are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we want to make sure that we are always protecting quality. Quality is critical to what we do and the little details that we do. For example, we have our own coffee roastery. We purchase our own beans. We roast our own coffee. It's fantastic. We want to make sure that we've got that quality. But as well, when we do an iced coffee, we hand make our own coffee ice cubes. So when you get your iced coffee, instead of just having regular ice cubes that dilute your coffee, they're actually shooting that flavor of coffee back into your iced coffee. So we want to make sure that those little details and that focus on quality wherever you go and every aspect of what we do stays in place. Because we think that's core to our success, that when people come in, they know that they're getting something great. So doing that, making sure that we stay focused on culture, that we're involved in our communities, that we're doing, some new products so that we've got new news out there, and that we're building a team thoughtfully. Working with franchise partners that, share our vision, that are excited to execute, like I said, excited to be a part of their community and, focused on building. So we want to grow, but we're not, we're privately owned. We don't have to grow at a certain level and so forth. We want to be smart about growth. Sometimes I feel like some companies just grow because they think, oh, I just have to grow. We have to grow. But, to what extent? And unfortunately right now we're seeing some fallout in the restaurant industry where some folks grew maybe a little bit too much and a little bit too fast, and they're having to backtrack. We don't want to do that, Brooklyn Water Bagel. We want to make sure that we're building a solid foundation, a solid future through everything we do. Yeah,
well, you guys have obviously have a very calculated growth, and slow and steady, I agree, wins the race. The companies that have tried to, or the companies who have grown so fast, is all different reasons why, of course. In some cases, it's pressure,
right,
that they feel like they have to, or they need to get to this royalty sufficient as quickly as humanly possible, but they lose sight of everything by opening too many franchises early on, and they can't support them, and then they end up imploding.
Right. So and we don't want to make those kinds of mistakes. We want to make sure that we are growing thoughtfully and so forth. Do I think, there's, as a company, we will stub our toe here and there? We will, but I think we'll learn a lot from that and make some adjustments. We're actually opening our first drive-thru location in a couple months, and we're excited about that. It's a big deal change for us, and may change the trajectory of where we grow and how we grow from learning from that experience. We're also doing pickup window and a drive-up pickup window and giving that a test. So we're going to be looking at different facets that make sense for the business, that make sense for our franchisees, most importantly, that make sense for our guests. And being flexible and making tweaks as we move forward.
Cool. What's the average footprint size?
1,800 square feet.
Okay. And so now introducing drive-thru, it's probably going to be something that's going to really inspire growth of additional drive-thrus. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that if they could?
We certainly think so. I mean, we think that it just makes an awful lot of sense. But we have to make sure in the drive-thru that we execute well, that we, again, live up to the guest's experience or expectation, and that we keep the quality of the product and the consistency where it needs to be.
Okay.
We don't want to cut corners.
Yeah. Do you see this thing going coast to coast? Is that the ultimate goal?
Yes. I think ultimately it goes coast to coast. But as I said, right now, it's looking at these next 6 units and the other ones we've got in the pipeline and so forth. I think we just want to make sure that we are successful unit by unit, franchisee by franchisee, and not thinking, 5 years down the road and saying, oh boy, I've got to be open in Washington State.
Yeah. Well, again, this is a great lesson for those emerging founders and CEOs that are listening or watching this to, learn what you're talking about right here. And that is just that calculated growth is not about growing just for numbers' sake. And that's where people get into a lot of trouble when they just want to grow as fast as humanly possible.
I agree.
Yeah. What about your timeline for these goals, though? I know we're looking at these 6, but have you thought about over this period of time, like how big is big?
Yeah, of course we've had those conversations internally, but I think that we continue to adjust those numbers as we look and learn, right? And so obviously if suddenly we realize that drive-thru is going to, change the concept dramatically in a great way.
Sure.
Finding those locations and, solidifying those locations can be a little bit more challenging, obviously, than the inline locations that we've got right now. So we'll build the program accordingly. Okay. But do I think, that we can get to, 50 to 100 units over the next 3 to 5 years? I do.
When you talk, I don't know, do you have conversation with prospective franchise owners, or does that just go through the franchise development department?
Oh, I always want to talk to the prospective franchise owners. Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to sell a franchise to everybody that, obviously inquires. Is there something, Dan, that you share with people when they're doing their due diligence that I don't want to say you give them a warning, but something you want them to really think about and consider carefully before they go forward? Is there anything you can share with us?
Yeah, it's that commitment level and the understanding that there's things that are key to us, like that quality that I spoke about, that we don't want to cut corners. The key to them is making sure that they are passionate and they are focused and they understand that execution is key and that it's something that you do day in and day out and day in and day out. That's what I want to talk to them about and really hear from them.
Yeah.
If they come in and say, well, I want to do this sort of part-time and, wouldn't this be sort of fun and a hobby and, I'll have my son-in-law involved in it and so forth. That's not, I don't think that that's the match. We're looking for somebody who's really personally committed and engaged in the business.
Sure. But since your locations are all multi-unit development, obviously the bandwidth of that person is only as far as they can go. Do you expect that person who buys the franchise to be intimately involved in that unit and be in the store, or do you see them just hiring managers?
We expect them to be intimately involved and in the store some, but yes, building an organization makes sense in that case, and understanding how they expect to build an organization and what they expect from the people that work for them is key.
Right. Well, they're learning really quick that they're really not in the bagel business, right? I mean, they're running an organization, especially when they're going to have 5 stores.
Right.
It's a machine that they really need to know how to operate.
Right. But I think in our restaurants, and one of the other benefits that we have is it's a pretty simple menu, and it is fairly simple to execute. And I think that that's something that's enjoyed and appreciated.
How did I not ask you, what is the most popular menu item?
The most popular menu item is our bagel breakfast sandwiches.
Of course. Okay.
In fact, I have to say this because I'm proud of this, Frank. The Daily Meal just picked us as the number one bagel breakfast sandwich in the country.
Really?
Over everybody else, yeah.
Well, I will
because it's that great.
Well, I will be the judge of that. I will give it a Wesley Chapel. Anthony, we are going to Wesley Chapel and getting bagels.
Let's do it.
We will do it.
I should have brought some bagel sandwiches
that
in here
is
and had you try.
Okay.
And then our lunch sandwiches are just absolutely fantastic too.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Before we go any further, if my wife was here, she would want to know the everything bagel. Does it have salt or no salt?
Salt.
All right. That's a legit, people. That is a legit everything bagel.
It is. You got to have salt added to it. No question. I'm an everything bagel person. So.
All right. Yes.
It's the third most popular bagel on our list of flavors.
Of course. Third?
Yeah.
What's number one?
Plain.
All right, fine. What's number two?
Plain and sesame seed, and then everything.
Oh man, people are missing out on the best one.
Yeah, everything is absolutely where it's at. But it's interesting to see, and we also do a salt bagel itself, obviously, and that's great.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course. All right, well, I will let my wife know the everything bagel does have salt. That is a legit everything bagel right
Absolutely.
There. All right, very cool. Well, Dan, I've enjoyed our conversation here today.
Thanks,
if someone
Frank.
was interested in learning more about Brooklyn Water Bagel, where can they go get more info?
Please reach out on our website, brooklynwaterbagel.com, and it's got all of our franchising information on the site.
Very great. All right, very good. Very good, Dan. All right, last thing, every podcast I end with the franchise tip jar, because the franchise community is so generous with sharing advice and tips and tricks along the way. Is it maybe a piece of advice that you would give to somebody, an entrepreneur that wants to franchise that concept before they go ahead and leap into franchising? Is there maybe a piece of advice that you'd give them?
Yeah, I think to really go out and spend time in that business and understand it and watch it. Some of our most successful franchisees spent, a lot of time really looking and understanding the restaurant and understanding what it takes to be successful in it. I think that's key. I mean, not sure that's some great tip. I'm sure you've heard that from other people, but I think really, understanding the business and not just looking at it peripherally.
Yeah.
So I think that's the key.
No, I think that's super important, and I have heard that before, but it's important just for reiterating it that people are hearing a common theme before they get into franchising. That making sure you got to know that business inside and out before
you really do.
Yeah, because it's a huge investment, and you're changing people's lives for the better or worse. So before you franchise, make sure you have your act together.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think you really have to love the business.
I agree.
So sometimes a franchisee candidate or even friends that are franchisees saw the positive business opportunity, but they didn't necessarily love it. And I think you really have to love what you do. I love bagels. I love this business. It's really exciting to me. I eat the product all the time, probably too much, because it's just great. Yeah. I'm proud of it. I love every bit of it. My family loves it. We're all involved in it. If this is a franchise commitment, you're building a life around this. You're building, into your communities and so forth. You got to really, really love it. It's got to be a part of you.
I agree, because especially, I've said this many times on the podcast, the reason why I believe you need to love what you do is because it's going to get you through the bad days, the bad weeks, the bad months, because we all have that in business where we go through, the highs and lows. But if you love what you do, you can stomach the pain easier, because if you hate it and you have a crisis, you're not going to survive it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They say it's always easiest to be a captain when it's a sunny, smooth sailing day out there. It's the tough part's when the seas are rough and you're trying to get through the storm. So yeah, loving something that you've got and loving your product and loving the business absolutely gets you through that.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for being on the show. I
appreciate
you,
Frank. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Let's go get some bagels.
Let's do it. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.